So with that, I will open it up to questions if there are any.
In the basket.
In the basket.
It's right there.
Eric, I know someone who has been diagnosed, his diagnosis is bipolar NOS. And he also says that he's a rapid cycler. And I don't know how to, in my mind it's difficult to reconcile those two. Is that?
In a rapid cycler, as I recall, means you've had 4 mood shifts in a year or more. Now, I would caution you that some people who say they shift several times a day probably have something else. Because usually for bipolar people, it does not happen that fast. But it can happen every couple of weeks or so, or every month. Or you can have a couple of weeks of major depression, and then be okay, and then a couple of weeks of hypomania. And it can go on like that. That's a true bipolar NOS. So that's a rapid cycling. I think it's 4, if I'm not mistaken. I should have brought the DSM, 4 per
that
year.
Is consistent.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions before I get to the basket?
Could you talk a little about cyclothymia?
Yes. Cyclothymia is similar to bipolar type 2. As you recall, bipolar type 2 means you've never had a full-blown manic episode. Only a hypomanic episode, which is less intense and less severe, and doesn't have to last a full week like a manic episode does. For example, there's never any psychotic features in a hypomanic episode. So you've had those, and then you've had depressions interspersed. But the depressions are not severe enough either to meet criteria for major depression that I pointed out before. If they did, and you had hypomanic episodes and major depressions, then it would be called bipolar type 2. But if you have hypomanic episodes and more minor depressions that don't meet the criteria, that's called cyclothymia. And treatment for them is similar. Maybe I can come back sometime and talk about treatment if anyone's interested. Any other? Yes,
Can bipolar 2 be treated without medicine? You said that possibly bipolar 1 could be. What about bipolar 2? Therapy, lots of therapy.
Or it depends. The best treatment for most of these is a combination of psychotherapy plus medication. Okay? I have a feeling bipolar 2, in some cases, and it depends, can be treated with psychotherapy alone if it's expert psychotherapy and people really know what they're doing. If it was a member of my family or a friend, I'd say take the meds and get psychotherapy. And I know many people who are treated with bipolar 2 who are treated with a rather lightweight medication regimen alone and do great. And by lightweight, I mean something like fish oil plus Provigil. You know. So
What provision?
Provigil is a medication that has an FDA indication for narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is when you're sitting there and just fall asleep.
My mother.
Until Provigil was invented a couple of years ago, the medical treatment for that was the stimulants like amphetamine or Adderall or Ritalin or something like that. But Provigil is better, and it does seem to have antidepressant effects. And it doesn't seem to have too much risk of setting off a manic or hypomanic episode. So for people with bipolar 2, especially if they have fatigue and slowed down thinking, Provigil can be quite useful. I like it. Of course, it's enormously expensive. It's not on Medi-Cal. Don't get me started on that. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was wondering, I'm bipolar and ADHD, and I have a pill combination that works wonderful. And it wasn't until like last Friday, I wasn't like suicidal, but I was kind of really down. And I'm wondering if since it happened just that one time, would you recommend maybe another pill combination or just something else?
Well, it really depends. I have to know more about your history and more about exactly what medications you're taking to see if I would recommend changing them. If it happened just once briefly and never before and doesn't happen again, I would talk about this in detail with who's ever prescribing the medication and see what they think.
You have to
If it's working great, as you say, for the most part, then they may want to tweak it a little bit.
Yeah.
Not really change it, but increase one ingredient of the cocktail or another. I will say that for many people with bipolar disorder, one medication is not enough. It's simply not enough. I wish it were enough. But it often takes a combination of medications to treat this. Yes, ma'am.
I've become aware that under the Bush administration and at Stanford University, there was a researcher, a highly respected doctor, who was taking money from the drug companies and promoting certain drugs. My question is, how do we trust these drugs? How do we trust the drug companies? How do you feel safe if you suspect a child of yours may have bipolar with exposing them to these drugs, when I understand that they are oftentimes, you're tweaking with people, and if a person is highly creative, is this putting them in some sort of a chemical prison, for lack of a better term? And how do we trust this process?
Well, that's a series of questions,
Yes.
and they're good ones. The drug companies have way too much influence and way too much influence in research. I think it's terrible that they fund the research because it's going to bias that research. Now, if you know how to read research, you can tell if the research is good research or bad research, no matter who funds it, if you can assume they're being honest. And I would say most of the times in peer-reviewed journals they are honest, although occasionally they're dishonest. They will actually falsify the research. Rarely. So it comes down to finding a doc who you think you can trust, who has a good reputation, who knows how to read these journals. Now, I had a very good internal medicine mentor who told me, well, when a new drug comes out, don't be the first doc to use it. Because, the FDA requires research, but it's not extensive research before they approve it. But he also said, don't be the last one to use it if it's good. And so I don't use a new drug immediately. I believe that. But after it's been out a couple of years and hundreds of thousands of people have used it, you have a pretty good idea about its safety, above and beyond what the FDA said. Okay? So try to use medications that have been out for a while. Try to find a doc who you trust, who will look at the research, first of all, knows how to read it. And after a while, you got to trust your doctor. Most doctors do not get paid by drug companies, although drug companies, try and bribe doctors by giving them presents, and that's now become pretty much illegal. When I first started, they used to take doctors to the Caribbean. It's just crazy. About all they can do now is buy you a lunch sometime or give you a meal if it's only doctors there. Or I don't even think they can give you a pen anymore. Because whether doctors want to believe it or not, gifts like that do influence their decisions. And it's been shown again and again in research. So, I'm friendly with the drug reps, but I'm straight with them. I say, if you want me to prescribe your med, it's got to be out for a while, and you got to show me good research.